The Exiles in Babylon conference is happening again April 3rd to April 5th, 2025 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I cannot wait for this conference. We're talking about the gospel and race after George Floyd. We're talking about transgender people in the church, social justice and the gospel, two perspectives, and a dialogical debate about whether the evangelical church is good for this country, featuring my new friend Adam Davidson. He's an atheist journalist, and Sean McDowell, my other good friend. They're going to banter around about that topic. We also have Latasha Morrison, Ephraim Smith, Mark Yarhouse, Malcolm Foley, and many other awesome speakers. We're also adding some breakouts this year, and we're going to have a killer after party. And I can't wait for that one, actually. If you want to attend a conference, you can do so by going to theologyraw.com. You want to register early. We do have an early bird, a fairly aggressive early bird special. It ends December 31st. So if you are planning on attending the conference, you want to sign up before then. You can also attend virtually if you can't make it out to Minneapolis. Again, April 3rd to 5th, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Exiles of Babylon. Go to theologyandtheraw.com, and I hope to see you there. Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Theology and Around. My guests today are Chad and Adaeze Brinkman, who are a mixed-race married couple who wrote an awesome book that I hold in my hands called White Boy, Black Girl. Oh, got to hold it up there. White Boy, Black Girl, What Our Differences Can Teach Us, One Honest Conversation at a Time. This is an outstanding book that narrates in raw honesty their Chad and Adaeze's relationship. And I learned so much about the intricacies of not just interracial couples, but also just conversations about race and just relationships as a whole. It's a fantastic book. I can't more highly recommend. Adaeze works in the creative arts, and Chad is a physical therapist. They love traveling and adventure together, taking in the beauty of God's creation and encouraging others to do the same. Oh, man. You're going to love this couple. Please welcome to the show for the first time, the one and only Chad and Adaeze Brinkman. All right, welcome to Theology and Raw, Adaeze and Chad. I'm going to keep working on that pronunciation, by the way. We had a offline conversation.
You do great. You actually, I would correct you if it wasn't.
And I will say, and we talked offline, and I so love that you do want to encourage people to learn the Nigerian pronunciation, not how most Americans would say your name. And I say that as one I am terrible at phonics, pronunciation, and just all that stuff. I was born deaf in my left ear. And so somebody pointed out to me recently that might be why phonics it takes a lot more. I don't know if that's true or not, but
sure.
That's my excuse.
I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit.
Seriously.
You did a great job. I think the left ear is just an excuse, man. You're doing great.
Well, Adaeze, tell us, how do most Americans pronounce your name? Tell us the Nigerian pronunciation and why that matters. Let's start there. Why not just jump right in?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So, also, thank you for having us. We're so excited to be on your show.
My pleasure.
So, as we talked offline, I was telling you, when someone said my name back to me when I was a little girl, they repeated Adaeze as Adaeze, and I was just kind of like, sure, like as a child, you don't really think about that. You notice it's wrong, but and everyone in my family still called me Adaeze. My relatives still call me Adaeze, but it became very, like, when we moved over here to the States, it just became my name, my Americanized name, and I have always felt like I don't want to go by that. That's not my name, but I feel like it's too late every time I would think about it because everyone knows me by Adaeze. And only recently did I just have this. It was kind of actually in anticipation of a move that we did recently. I just realized, like, enough's enough, and I want to take back my name in a sense and not feel like I'm inconveniencing anybody by having people call me by my actual name, because it's not anyone else's name, it's mine, And so when we told my mom, she teared up and everything and was so touched. And my dad is in heaven now, but she was saying it meant so much to her because it's not the same even meaning to say Adaeze versus Adaeze. So Adaeze in Nigerian culture means esteemed daughter of the King of Kings. So it means princess, but it's like, it's not just, oh, you princess. It's like, no, you are like the daughter the king and reigning Lord of our lives, you know? And I was like diminishing that meaning this whole time is how I felt by not going by the name that my parents so intentionally and lovingly named me. I'm the fourth of three older boys. So my mom was always like, we prayed for you, we kept believing for you, all that. And so, you know, it was such an encouraging confirmation from the Lord of like, yes, reintroduce yourself to the world. That's something Chad told me when I decided to do this. He was like, it's like you get to just reintroduce the world to who you are, which it feels like that because of everything the Lord's doing in my life right now. So that's kind of how it trickled into what it is now. And in the book, you'll see that I say both pronunciations just to share that that's part of my name, but it is Adaeze. That's who I am.
Oh man, so good, so good. As you should. I'm so glad you do challenge people to say your real name.
Thank you.
I want people to say if people call me Preston or something, I was like, yeah, that's not, you know, not my name.
Not really. I'm not a Disney character. Preston.
Yeah, Preston.
Not like Gaston and Beauty and the Beast.
I get people to call me Sprinkles a lot. Sprinkles. I'm like, okay, there's only one of me. You don't need to pluralize it, you know.
Yeah, you get it.
How did you guys meet? Let's start there. How far back does that go? And what was that? Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, so I moved to Denver, and Adaeze was leading worship at a church at the time, and I joined the worship team. So I was actually her volunteer, and so our relationship started as kind of like a leader to a volunteer within the church, and so we got along really well immediately, and we ended up having really good conversations. And you know, it had there not been that interesting leadership dynamic, we would have probably started hanging out more because here we are, a married couple, so something was clearly jiving at the time.
It was clearly jiving because where did you position yourself strategically on stage?
Man, we're gonna go there on podcast. I would intentionally position myself behind my soon-to-be wife because I was playing guitar. So I wanted specific views of what was going on in front of me, so this is a super holy conversation.
Yes.
And so
you say in the book, you talk about that in the book. I was like, all right, here we go.
I do. I forgot that we said that actually in the book. So I glorified the Lord by placing myself behind my future wife. I had her back from the start.
Yeah.
And thank you for backing me.
I always.
So we met in church, long story short, and one thing led to another, and we ended up I was going to go up another campus of this church, and so that opened the door for us to actually start a deeper relationship because I was no longer one of her volunteers. And so we went and got tacos, and it was initially, genuinely, it was just for me to say, hey, thank you for everything you've done. Thanks for helping me grow in this season and be a part of what you're doing, but I'm going to go help this new location launch. And 5 hours later, we closed down a brewery down the street, and things led one to the next, and we ended up having some really interesting conversations even there.
About dating, not us, but like dating within the church, all those dynamics for single people. I think some single people couldn't probably understand what we're saying. And racial conversations too. There was a lot of like, what would it be like in your family if you brought home a black girl and stuff like that. Once we realized, okay, we both like each other, kind of stuff. But even before that, I think there were some conversations like that.
Well, you asked me that night.
100%.
You asked me that night, am I attracted to black women?
Mm-hmm.
This is an accidental date. We didn't know this was a date.
This isn't even a date. This is like a get together to say thanks, and this is where the conversation went.
5 hours later, yes,
All
I am
right.
asked, do I find Black women attractive?
Well, okay. It wasn't a jump from I'm leaving the ministry you're a part of to find Black women attractive.
Yeah.
There was a journey, Preston. But
Okay.
but yes, eventually that was the destination. It was one of those things. Okay, so I mentioned I feel the brothers. They had repeated at being single for so long. At least felt like for me, they were like, Adaeze, you can't assume with guys. Friendship for guys is different. Friendship for girls. So when you think a guy might like you, don't assume. Just wait till he calls it a date. Wait till he says you guys are or asks you to be his girl. Don't assume. So it was basically like let the man pursue you and hunt you. He's the hunter, but don't be afraid to break some sticks. Like Bambi and stuff. So like I had to make sure that this is what was happening. So yeah, I asked him if he attracted the Black woman, and he said yes. And I was like, who? Can't just
Because I couldn't just say Beyonce.
No.
I couldn't say the one Black woman that all white guys are gonna know.
So I forget what he said. I think he said I don't remember. Anyway,
A couple.
Yeah. So then I was like, all right, so just for research purposes strictly, do you find me attractive?
She actually
you said that. You went
For
there.
those of you on YouTube, she did the hair flip and sat up straight in her little bar stool.
I was like, let's talk
And
about
so-
let's be adults here. Let's and without missing a beat, Preston. He was like, yeah. I was just like,
Oh, there you
my
go.
bad. I didn't
Confidence.
realize what was happening. So
It wasn't okay. Thank you for the vote of confidence, Preston. It wasn't confidence. It was that she telegraphed that move. It was very clear that
Well, she was drawing it out of you. I mean, come on,
She
right? I mean,
was.
you were fishing. Yeah.
This wasn't.
confidence, because if it wasn't confidence, you would have been like, no. But it was just like,
You think
Yeah.
you were Bambi? You were not Bambi. You were an elephant knocking down trunks of trees along the way. Very clear what was happening.
I have no regrets.
I'm gonna guess at a brewery in Colorado, there probably wasn't a lot of other Black women there that you can kind of look around and say, well, among the options here, I find this.
I don't think there was that night.
No, we were definitely you were the only Black person in that brewery.
You know what's funny? Around that time, I would notice that kind of stuff more. I did not even think about that night. I'm having trouble remembering.
I was just
Wow.
that interesting. That
You
night.
were that interesting.
Yeah.
So when you guys started to get into more below the surface conversations about race, let's go there, because I know you guys, and the book documents your journey with exquisite detail, raw honesty. I love it. It's such a great book. Take us back to when it started to get a little bit, I don't want to say intense, but like, oh, this is more difficult than I thought it would be.
Yeah. Well, so right from the start, so I come from a family that's Southern, and long history of Southern family. Like that's just the roots are in kind of farm towns in the South, and so with that, there's a lot of beliefs and understandings that just are kind of inherent in that culture and where my family's from. And so even the initial conversations of, hey, I went on a date with this girl, and my family knew who Adaeze was. And even though there was no indications that there'd be an interest, I had talked about her. She was my leader. She was an important part of the church that I was going to, and we had a lot of fun together. So I had conversations. I knew who she was. But then to turn it into, hey, I think I went on a date with this person. That struck a chord, right? That's where now the rubber starts to meet the road, and there's lots of honest questions that are coming up that are coming from cultural blindness, cultural misunderstanding. It's bucking a system that really hasn't had to be addressed within the family and cultural context. And so even from there, things started to turn, and there are just a lot of questions right off the bat that you have to wrestle with, which is interesting at a time where excitement is so high and you're excited to go down this new path of somebody you're interested in, but yet there's also this dichotomy of there's a lot of hard questions to deal with. And so right from the start, we didn't have much of a time frame of just pure excitement and
rose-colored lenses.
Yeah, they came off pretty quickly. Yeah. And so some of that stuff was happening right away. And then even on our third or fourth date, going to a brewery, and now I'm not as interesting as this 5-hour long accidental date. We're we're at another brewery, and Adaeze realizes that she's the only Black person in the room, and I'm completely oblivious. And so now we have to enter into that conversation. And so we're literally like less than a month in, and we're already starting these conversations of, do I see what's going on? How does that make you feel? How does this relationship now get affected by the circumstances?
And at what point, for me, it was like, at what point do I bring up certain things that in the past have caused dissension, have caused defense, have caused, oh, you're too sensitive, or it's not everything's about race, or why do you always make everything about race, especially when I dated interethnically. And so it was so much outward stuff. There wasn't actually a ton really here that we had to figure out as far as just us. I think being later on in our, what I would say, later in the stereotypical dating age of, at least in our church, we were kind of older in that realm. And so I think we had gotten to the point where it was like, this is me, you can take it or leave it kind of realness, which was good because of all the outward things that were causing us to become like, to just dive in to the deep end really quickly. Not to the point where it was too fast. It was just like, oh, like Chad said, like, we don't have time to just kind of, hey, just pretend, you know? And so that was a huge struggle for me. Like, the Holy Spirit would always ask me, do you want to be actually known by this guy? Or do you want to just play it safe for however long and delay the inevitable? Like, you're going to have these conversations with him if you want to be with him. I know that I can't be with someone that I'm not myself with. That wouldn't work. Especially all that. Yeah.
Can you take us just a little bit deeper into those previous conversations, relationships that that once you got below the surface, they didn't go well, or, oh, you're making everything about race, you're too sensitive? Can you give us an example of what that might look like, or maybe a scenario?
Like in the past or with Chad?
In the I was thinking in the past, but I know either one. Yeah, because I know you guys had some of that too. So wherever you want to go, just that was
yeah. Let's see. Well, I'll start with in the past, so those are coming a little easier than my memory fillers. But in the past, there was actually a very similar start, at least, to what was going on with family stuff in our situation. So there was a scenario where I was dating another white guy in the past, and I was trying to explain to him how, hey, I don't think your family is okay with me because XYZ. I won't bore you with one less details, but it was like certain things that would happen over a certain period of time, and he wasn't seeing them when I would bring them up individually. And so eventually I was like, hey, I think you need to like maybe check with your family, see if they're okay with me, with you dating me. He's like, why? I was like,
can you give us the examples? Actually, I'm curious.
Sure,
I think
absolutely.
that'd be helpful for people to know. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, so we joke about this. Sometimes I go into too much detail when I tell stories, and Chad's way more just like, well, here's the things you need. So
this one's important.
Yeah. So we had visited. They lived on a farm. We had visited them, and they had their grandparents there, or like the man I was dating, his grandparents were there. So the parents of his parents, and he brought me in, and the granddad looked at me and was kind of like, he made this comment that was like, your kindness here, or you're here. This is interesting, kind of thing. Like, he just kind of made it a very, everyone looked my way. And it was one of those like, oh, like I walked into it being like, this may or may not go well. I could stereotype them. They live on a farm. in this area of the world, of the US, which I won't call out, but it was one of those, like, I had to fight all the stereotypes, right? And then I walk in and then there's just very cold greeting like that, if that's even a greeting. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, like I'm saying, that's what he was saying to me. And that might not sound in this moment like a very big deal, but it was just everyone else got a very different greeting than I did. And so that was the first thing. And then his dad was talking to me and asking, so where are you from? And would guess stereotypically, like, sound like, I don't even want to make those actual places sound bad, but it was like a stereotype of me that he had experienced in the past, it seemed like, that he was putting on me. So
Okay. Huh.
Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was like are you, and I'm not remembering right now, and it could be some trauma stitch that I'm like blocking out, but I just recall it being a very like, no, that's actually, I'm from here, and actually I do this. And so it felt very, you have a preconceived idea of me, which, you know what, to be fair, I had to fight my own of you all. But now being here, I'm not acting on them. I'm here. I didn't not come because I thought maybe you were these racist farmers. And now I'm here and you're stereotyping me as this not well learned Black woman who you seem to have an issue with. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's
so when I would bring up certain things, and I wouldn't in the moment, this was back when I wasn't as confident to stand up to things in the moment. I didn't want to be the problem. I didn't want to make everyone else feel uncomfortable or as uncomfortable as I was feeling. And now I'm a little more comfortable doing that. But at the time, I didn't say anything until it kind of built up. And so some of the blame was put on me of like, why didn't you say anything in the moment? Fair. Okay. Yeah, but you're missing the point. Did you notice that these things happen and they keep happening? And it was like, that's just how my grandparents are, or that's just how he is. Can't take it personally. And I was just like, no, I don't think it is, because he doesn't do that to anyone else here. And sure, he's not meeting this person for the first time. That person was kind of new. It felt like I had to defend my experience instead of it being like, I could see how that would be really hurtful for you first meeting my parents and my And so that's what I mean when I've said in the past, I have brought up stuff and it hasn't been heard as, though I've never seen my loved one around Black people, I can believe you that they're maybe not treating like you as a Black person great. Because that excuse was like, this person loves everybody. This person would never. And one of the things I would say would be like, well, have you ever seen them around a Black person? And they'd usually be like, no, actually I haven't, So
that was my next question. That's my next question is how would you have wanted him to respond? You kind of said it, but not to like jump his grandpa's face and say, how dare you, whatever, but like just to believe your experience in that moment. Is that the kind of minimum? Okay.
I think that's it. Yeah. It was, rather than oh man, yeah, I did see that. Even just acknowledge that you were in the room. Acknowledge that you also saw what he did and that it was not okay. Unless you're trying to tell me you are okay with it, then we got a different problem. But like, I'm going to trust that you don't think that's okay either. You wouldn't do that. You didn't do that to me, I think it was the fact that it was like, well, excuse. Defend that person. Instead of sit with me. And I'm at the time your girlfriend, I'm the person you're bringing into this space. It just seemed like there was no awareness of what that space could mean for me, because he had grown up with these people. He knew these people's hearts, which it wasn't about their heart. It was about what was happening in the room, and I was learning at the moment too. So there's grace for, I didn't even realize that's why I didn't do anything. It wasn't that wasn't even the point I was trying to make. It was, can you see why this is not okay? Great. Okay. Then can we move forward out of that? But if we can't even agree that this is not okay and that I was hurt and I was othered in that room, what are we doing?
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Good. Yeah, absolutely. Take us to the time when you guys had a similar adjacent kind of experience.
Which one do you want us to talk about, Preston?
Well, I think that one in the restaurant, that third or fourth
Yeah.
date in the restaurant, when when you and you didn't solve it that night, like you both kind of went home, and I'm just kind of recalling your both.
Yeah.
It was really cool to see your experiences narrated in the book. So yeah, by the way, the book is both of you writing individually, so you know exactly who's writing what. So it's almost like a conversation between Chad and Adaeze, going back and forth on how they kind of interpreted your journey together, which I thought was a great way to narrate it. So
Thank
yeah,
you.
take us to that. Take us to that restaurant.
Yeah. So I think so. There's a couple different restaurant examples too.
Yeah.
So there, maybe we'll go to. I can even just go to the one that early one too. So when we're sitting in a brewery in Colorado, and Adaeze notices that there's no other black people in the room, but B, that there are also some white people turning and looking at us, and not just like, I mean, restaurants people look, right? It wasn't just a side glance; it was literally people turning like 180 degrees to come stare at us. It was awkward. It was weird, and it was people that were not like in the table adjacent to us. It'd be people kind of across the room, and I'm completely oblivious. I have no idea what's going on. I'm just sitting at a restaurant, hanging out with a new girlfriend, or you know what? I don't think it was a girlfriend yet because I hadn't specifically asked.
Was it not?
No, I hadn't specifically asked, "Will you be my girlfriend?" Which that's a story for another time. But so so I'm completely oblivious. We're getting a couple beers because I'm a big beer guy, and so I wanted to. I'm teaching my new girlfriend about some beer, and I'm going to get the most bitter thing in there just to see a bitter beer face.
But you did
once or twice.
You successful in this endeavor.
A double IPA.
A double IPA. Yeah, absolutely. So we're sitting there, and Adaeze's getting a little bit more uncomfortable, and at some point she brings up to me, "Hey, do you notice these people?" And me, completely glassed over. I'm like, "No, I have no idea what you're talking about." There's this, okay, great. And I end up looking and seeing, but she still like hits me.
I was saying, I think you caught someone like right when they were doing it.
I did. Yeah. I caught somebody in the act, and that sounds accusatory. I just saw somebody. But so Adaeze brought it up to me, and she's feeling, or she expresses her feelings of, "Hey, this is kind of uncomfortable. Why would they be looking at us? What's going on?" And my first reaction, I believe I actually said this. My first reaction was, people look at us all the time. Like, what's going on? What's the big deal? And you're covering your mouth because you know it was a bad thing.
I'm actually curious. Why did you cover your mouth, Preston?
Well, I want you to unpack why that is, because I can understand someone saying, "Yeah, what's wrong with that?"
Yeah,
like almost diminishing the potential impact that can have, and almost demonstrating resilience to the.
Sure.
I don't want to say like soft racism or whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Microaggressions.
Yeah.
Possibly.
I wanted to see Adaeze jump up and say, "Hey, Jim Crow, you need something over here?"
What's up? And that's something that was always this mind game for me. Is like, I would usually first question the why, and then I would have to play this game of like, don't assume that it's because you're black or because they don't want you here. They could just be admiring your outfit. They could think you guys are a cute couple. Like, what? Like, there was always that thought. Like, even if I succeed at the wrestling match of, is it about race or is it because of this? There's still that initial, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was always like a thing I had to calm down. Okay, or maybe it is. But we don't have to focus on that. That is it, you know. that was something always weird been teaching me, especially at that time. This was 2019, so right before 2020, all the racial unrest came up like crazy in the U.S. It was something that I noticed more and more around that time, and 2020 it hit like a extreme. But so my question to Chad of like, do you notice was actually kind of like, what do you think the looks mean? Because I'm not trying to label them as anything. I'm just trying to share my experience. Again, like we talked about with the last one, like I want to share my experience of this feels uncomfortable, partly because I don't know why. And sure, I can just ignore them. I'm not always that strong. Like I'm not always just able to be like, whatever, don't care, especially when it's everywhere and so often. And it was just weird. It was just weird. You know, it makes you feel like, do I have something on my teeth? Like, you know, it's one of those things. And so that's why it's even kind of strange to bring up, because like I don't want you try to think I'm suggesting a theory, but wait, what do you think? You know, like it was just one of those like, this is this is weird to talk about and it's weird to bring up, but I feel like I have to bring this up with you if we're gonna move forward in our relationship, because this might be our reality here at the time in Colorado. Not having as much diversity and not seeing as much, you know, inter-ethnic relationships in public. And so that was kind of my heart, but like I don't, obviously the moment you don't maybe stick to explain all that. And so when Chad was like, oh, I don't really see anything going on, I was kind of like, okay. So good to know that we might not be on exactly the same playing field right now. No, nothing wrong with that. So then we moved into like, okay, this is what they mean to me, or at least what they make me think. Then all those questions I just shared with you. And then after that, I feel like that's when there was a shift for you, because your eyes started opening to my experience. Would that be fair?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to give myself enough credit to say it perfectly happened that night. It took a while to get there. But in me saying something like, hey, of course they're looking. We're at a restaurant. People look. Sure. It diminished the fact that Adaeze was having these questions. She was having to punt them out of her head. Right. And so, like you said, Preston, people could totally see that as me showing some resilience. And I think within me, it probably was some resilience. I'm like, oh, whatever, no big deal. But Adaeze is not sharing that with me she's sharing it with me because it's how she's feeling and it's something she's noticing. And so for me to say, yeah, of course we're looking, whatever, it's diminishing the fact that there is an emotional battle, even if it's a small emotional battle, she's dealing with. And now I've said, I'm not going to be there. I'm just going to stay over here and think my own way and feel my own way and just ignore the fact that you had this happen to you or us, but ignore the fact that it hit you differently than it will hit me. And so, Did that answer your question too?
That absolutely does. And I'm wondering, does that get, I mean, I'm trying to frame it as a question, but it's more an observation, I guess.
Sure.
Like, it just sounds very exhausting that you're constantly having to interpret little signals as, is this racism? Do they like my dress? Do they think I'm cute? Do they like my hairstyle? Am I being too sensitive? Am I not being sensitive enough? Is this I mean, it's like the wind, it's like a computer with all these windows open constantly, and it just bogs down the
never thought of it like that, but that was
right. I mean, because I the only thing I could compare it to, this white guys always like to compare. Oh yeah, I know what you're going through, but I mean, like if I'm speaking and my mind's just constantly thinking about making sure you say it this way, they say it that way. Oh shoot, did I say it wrong that way? Especially when I talk on controversial stuff, and it's like every word counts. I am mentally exhausted. Sure. My brain just constantly second guessing everything, or just like that. Then is it? I mean, just somebody understanding, or at least wanting to understand, just how that experience that you go through, probably all throughout the day and most days, is just that's a challenge that a lot of people don't have to experience.
It is, and honestly, I feel very seen with how you just described that. So thank you. And I think it's really important to note that that is my mental game because of my experiences, because of times when it has been confirmed that yes, it is because of race, right? Yes, it is because they disapprove of me or don't think I belong here. So for someone else who maybe has never experienced that, they're probably not having all these things going on, right? But for my specific experiences and where I was in life and the growth path the Lord had me on, that was my reality.
Yeah.
And so, and even now, like I don't have that as much. We do live in a more diverse area anyway, or a diverse place.
Okay.
So I don't have to think about it as much. But at that time, yeah, it wasn't just all those things going off of, is it this, is it that? It's like, well, once you maybe decide it is or isn't, or I'll say once you decide or figure out evidence shows that it is confirmed. Now it's like, well, how do I perfectly be the perfect Black person? How do I say something without offending them, without, and then there's that whole, at least for me, that's the whole mind game, right? So, and I think even being in ministry for so long around that time, there was a lot of like how I present myself was always under a microscope, and that's just the reality. And that's not negative or positive. That's just the reality of the job I had. So I think that in combination with that kind of reality had just made it it kind of moonlight in this second guessing of myself a lot, and second guessing of my experience. And because if I don't describe my experience perfectly, then you won't believe it. At least that's what my history has shown me. So then there's it's the mind games of everything we talked about. It's also the mind games of, okay, wait, don't judge this person based off of this negative experience you just had yesterday, or don't let this person get you to your breaking point because you have all these built up experiences right underneath it or right before it. So there are so many things that can go into a race conversation in the present on my end. That's not even including everything on Chad's side, right? So we in that moment were these two opposite experiences, opposite opinions from those experiences in that moment, trying to be like, let's talk about this really uncomfortable situation that's happening to both of us at the same time, but we're both experiencing such different realities of it. So how do I not discount you being not bothered by it, Chad? And how do you not discount me being bothered by it? That is the crux, I think, of interethnic relationships that want to go deeper, like you said, under the surface level stuff. It's easy to just say, I'm not bothered by it, so you go deal with it by yourself. Well, I am bothered by it, so I can't talk to you. It's easy to just like isolate ourselves, but that's something the Lord's been teaching us. And part of why we wrote this book is like, when you meet in that messy middle, change can happen. Like that's where God is like, both of you are outside of your comfort zones. Both of you are at the end of your, I know how to do this. Now I got you. Now I can work. Now miracles are going to happen. Chains are going to break because I'm going to use you to help free this person or whatever. So that was like a huge start to the deep stuff for us this date that Chad was talking about. It was a breaking point for me, I think, to even trust that he could go there with me. We haven't gone to that part of the story, but it wasn't just, Chad didn't just stay in the like, nope, that happened on my end. Like we started diving after that. And I think that was, for me, a really important moment in our relationship.
Support for today's podcast episode comes from iHerb. iHerb offers the best curated selection of over 50,000 wellness products at the best possible value across a variety of different categories, such as supplements, sports nutrition, groceries, bath and personal care, and even stuff for your pets. Okay, so this is your one-stop shop for all your health and wellness needs. Look, you guys know how I really value health if you've listened to me for more than 5 minutes. For me, I want to feel good. I want to take care of my body, but I also see this as a theological issue. I think, God created us as embodied people, and so bodily health, I believe, is a spiritual issue. What I love about iHerb is that they test and verify to ensure that what you find in every bottle is what is supposed to be there. Products available at iHerb are sourced directly from the brands or authorized distributors in the US, so there's no third-party sellers. And this is really important when there's companies out there selling fake products and you have no idea what the ingredients are that go into the products. iHerb does not allow third-party sellers on its website. You get free shipping in the US on purchases of over $30, and they offer 24/7 customer service if you have any questions about your order. So our listeners, Theology and our listeners, get 22% off your first order when you use the code Theology. you have to go to iherb.com/shop/theology. Okay, a couple slashes there. Go to the show notes. You can check out the link. Existing customers get 15% off. Okay, so if you're a first-time customer, 22% off your first order at iherb.com/shop/theology. Use the code theology for your discount. Choose iHerb because wellness matters. Hey friends, if Theology in the Raw has blessed or challenged you in any way, would you consider supporting the show through Patreon at patreon.com/theology in the raw? We are actually revamping our bonus material that Patreon supporters get. So we are going to 2 bonus Q&As per month for all the different paid levels. Silver level gets access to ask questions for the Q&A episode. And also you will get access to Exiles in Babylon archived content, which will be releasing different videos every month. Also access to bonus research episodes that I'm gonna record from time to time. Access to rough drafts of certain things I'm working on, which is a little scary for me to let people look into that because it's a rough draft. Gold and Gold Plus members get we have monthly Zoom chats and all the other perks that the other tiers get access to as well. So again, if you want to support the show, it really does help us to flourish as a ministry. Again, patreon.com/theology in the raw. I will see you in the community. I want to know from you, like, when was the first kind of breakthrough moment where you were like, oh, I feel like I'm kind of getting it. And maybe when you responded in a way, and I want, maybe I should ask both of you actually, when you responded in a way where Adaeze was like, yes, you get it now.
Yeah. So I don't know if there was a breakthrough moment, actually. I think this is small steps in the right direction over a really long period of time. And I think the thing that changed that night was my eye-opening experience to realize that I have to get out from behind my lens. And because as I'm putting my lens on Adaeze at the time, then I'm not able to see her. And so that was, I think, the first time that I really tried to step out of my lens. And the more that happens, especially in a relationship with the safety of dating and then engagement and then marriage, with that, it's easier to step out behind your lens and really get vulnerable. And also kind of expect that from the other person too, because it's vulnerable to step out of your comfort zone. It's also vulnerable to step out of the other person's comfort zone and be able to share it well. So I don't think there was a moment that was like, got it right, there we go. I think it was just slowly over time. It was lesson after lesson. This one was one lesson of just my surroundings mean something different to me than they do to my girlfriend at the time. Yeah. And understanding just that the surroundings can look different says something. And then later conversations, going to what Adaeze was just talking about with, for example, why does everything have to do with race? That type of question. Somebody, a Black person says, whatever, was that racist? Was that racism? And then we as white people immediately say, but I'm not racist. And so that whole thing where the learning that the question of, does this have to do with race, is backed by that whole story, a lifetime of experiences, and some of them being really honest experiences, some of them being experiences full of gaslighting and manipulation of the thoughts and what's happening. And so getting into this type of a conversation, I realized for Adaeze has so much behind it. And then for me also, there's so much behind it too, just from the white perspective. And so that's another one of those steps. And so I think it takes a lot of those steps to start to realize, or to start to get to the point where you can say, okay, I realize that I don't know everything that's going on, but I can actually take this question of, does race have anything to do with this, as a true question? Because now I understand, just because I know her better, that she actually just needs me to answer this question because it's a question that she has because of those gymnastics that she was just talking about. Does it have to do with it? Does it have anything to do with race? Are they just looking at us because we're an interracial couple? Do they like my dress? Do they like my hair? Are they going to come touch my hair? Are they going to whatever, X, Y, Z?
Which I think is kind of bag of words.
But so that's, I think just getting along that process to get to the point where you can start to understand this is what's going on it's not a lightning bolt moment. It takes a long time. So
yeah.
Can we flip it around? I'm curious.
Yeah.
If you've had,
yeah.
You know, I mean, I would imagine the majority of your social engagements along these lines are what we've been talking about. But have you been in a context where maybe, I don't know, maybe it's bringing Chad home or whatever, or like where you've been in spaces where people look at Chad as like, what are you doing with the white boy over there?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. How do you guys handle that? Is that the same thing, or is that different?
It is different, but I'll let you take it. But it is different.
Yeah, it's different for us. I would say individually, it's different for all the different reasons, and as a couple, I think it's different for us for different reasons than maybe another couple. But yeah, the one that sticks out to me the most for me bringing Chad home, so to speak, is a loved one of mine saying that we already had two interracial marriages already in the family. And a joke was made. I was hoping you would end up with a black man because we already have enough white people family.
we already picked up a couple whites.
Yeah.
Can you even out the ratio, I guess? And that was eventually apologized for. I don't think I even had to bring it up.
I think it was basically on leader.
Yeah. And that was honestly just the worst of it on my side of the family, unless I'm
well, yeah.
As far as like a big something said overtly.
I don't think there haven't been hurtful moments. Maybe let's put it that way. So the difference is the history, right?
Sure.
For Adaeze, there's so much racism that's so negative and so hurtful. Where me as a white dude, I've been able to live in ignorance is bliss for so long that if something hits me, I'm like, oh crap, I didn't know that was even a thing. Whatever. Right. And I keep moving, right? So that's why it's different, just because there's not as much negative emotion around it. But I think about most experiences when I'm coming into a space, into a predominantly or fully black space, even if eyes come on me, it's sure, maybe there's been times where I've felt this kind of prove it moment, but nothing has ever been nothing's ever been that.
I do remember I forget where we were visiting, but we were in a predominantly black city, and we definitely got more looks then from black people than we got from white people, which was flips from where we had lived in Denver at the time.
That was an interesting moment.
That was really strange, so that we hadn't gotten that. Like at least where we lived in Denver, my black friends just all loved him and everything in Denver, and so that was like we almost forget that it can go both ways in a sense. And then we were recently in a black-owned restaurant, and after we left, I asked Chad, like, was that guy the guy that was helping us, or like our server? Was he like treating you a certain way? I forget what I asked you exactly, but I asked about it.
Yeah, you're picking something up.
And I just wanted to know from his side, because it's interesting how much he will ask me that when it's, the majority. The reality is the majority is that happens to me and not Chad usually. And so I think you were even kind of like, oh, what do you think about this? That doesn't happen.
That one was more recent. So I said to you, yeah, he was definitely cold to me.
Yeah.
But so for the purposes of your question, Preston, sure, some things happen, but it's not like it doesn't flip in a bad way.
Just thinking out loud, and correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, it's hard to detach maybe those individual one-off experiences from the larger socio-historical dynamics of hashtag slavery, Jim Crow. So, and white people historically, and perhaps even today, holding a lot more power just
Mhm.
by being white and male and everything. So you're coming at this individual experience with a whole different context, not to diminish maybe the legitimate coldness, the legitimate soft racism, the legitimate like, why are you taking one of our black girls away? You know, whatever. Like that I'm sure is not fun and easy, but it's still categorically different.
It is,
given the socio-historical history here. You know?
Exactly. Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head, because I enter the world when I leave in the morning. I enter the world as a white man. So even if something like that happens at a restaurant, the second we leave that restaurant, 90% of the time, I'm still back into my position of power, my position of privilege, maybe to put in a softer word. But I step right back out into the world that's slanted toward me. And I know that I'm going to walk into the grocery store here in town, and I'm probably going to hear Ed Sheeran on the radio or something. I'm going to hear some white dude singing something with an acoustic guitar on the radio, right? So it's going to immediately come back to, okay, well, this is a comfortable spot for me. So I think that's a big point as to why it doesn't affect me long term, because for me, it's a short duration of something that's maybe slanted away from me, but then the second I walk into something else, 90% of the time it's slanted right back toward me. Where for Adaeze, it's everything is slanted away, and then you get another thing that's just throwing you down the hill even farther. So there's not that affirmation that immediately comes to say, hey, who you are is okay, or who you are is normal, or who you are is
a one-off.
Yeah. So how was it when you brought Adaeze home to your family? What was that journey like, Chad?
I love how casual you asked that. It's just like skin there. Let's go.
So my family has been very supportive. Largely, there, like I said, there's been some blind spots. So it has been. There were hard moments. There were teaching moments. But my immediate family, like so they actually met Adaeze on our engagement trip. I proposed and then brought Adaeze home, and it was just because
that's bold.
Well, it was location. So it was location. It was also COVID as well, and so there was a lot of factors leading up to that being the case. But I mean, they had a beautiful dinner prepared for us and opened a nice bottle of wine. And so how was it? I'm not gonna lie and say that there were no tense moments. There absolutely have been. There's been, like I said, harder conversations. There's been things that we've needed to talk about, and a lot of it has come from a lot of these cultural blind spots, and really just not understanding the dynamic of what this is and what it's turned into. And so there's been a lot of those teaching moments, and it's been tiring at times, and it's been hard, but also my family has tried hard to get to a point where we can actually, be together, and it feels good. And so,
there was a lot also, Preston, leading up to the bringing home, like the actual me physically coming home to them in that sense. So like a lot happened over the phone, or like, not in person, to lead up to that coming home moment, to where that felt how it did. So I think that there's something to be said about not being afraid to do the work before you bring somebody home. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's not be oblivious. I think Chad was so good with like not being afraid of those tough conversations on the phone, or however many they had to have, that Chad had to have, in order to prepare for the homecoming, so to speak, to be a celebration, and especially when it's going to be around us getting married. And so I don't feel like you give yourself enough credit for that. Like there was conversation after conversation, and there was a letter written that was painful, but like it opened up a bigger conversation. And Chad like did some research, even with like where in the Bible that it's not a sin to marry interethnically, because that was a belief in a certain family member. And there was a lot of preparation, there was a lot of prayer, there was a lot of not shying away from being like, no, that's not okay, on Chad's end. and to where I didn't have to really fight those battles myself with these new people that didn't know yet. And which is, I'm just realizing as I'm telling this, I'm realizing how beautifully poetic that is of the Lord, that I had that experience where I was in the past, what I was just telling you about, trying to like get this guy to see this is not cool. You don't see that. To now Chad going to war for me, for us, to where I had asked him, like, I think you need to take some time to think about whether we should be together or not because of all the stuff that's coming at us from your family. And it actually almost broke us up.
Yeah.
And for Chad to like hold my face in that moment and be like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going, like, it's like he had to like tell me because I had come from, like we talked about a little bit, a past of just not that. And so that is so huge in our story was Chad taking that initiative, not leaving it up to me, still wanting to learn with and from me where he could. Bless you.
Bless.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's the first point. Yeah.
I was gonna. No, you go ahead, Chad. Go ahead.
So we say this in the book too. I genuinely am so proud of how far my family has come, because I'm so grateful that my wife recognizes the work that I put in. And I know that you know this as well too, but it also took so much work from my family to step in as well. And so even though some of the questions were hard, even though some of the questions felt maybe even hurtful because of my current situation, it still takes so much effort to step in like that. And so I'm so proud of how far they've come. And it's hard work to have a worldview challenge. And that's really kind of what was needed. And so the fact that they were able to step in and challenge a worldview that has really not been challenged much, that's huge. Yeah. And so it's hard work, but that's part of the reason why we write the book, right? It's really hard work to step in and challenge what we view and what we see and what's real to us, and then actually pull ourselves out of that hole and go into another one and say, okay, actually, this is a truth for somebody else. Yeah. It's so hard to do that and then actually try to understand where they're coming from. And so, it was hard work with the family, but it was also valuable. It's worth it. And we're in a different place because of all of those hard conversations.
We're all products of our social and familial and ecclesial environments too. I mean, not to take the blame off individuals who are making maybe bad choices, whatever, like responding wrongly. But I mean, we're all products of our environment, so that's, I love that you see it that way. It's like, it's not where did you come from, but how are you getting to where you need to be? And it's hard for all of us. We all have that. We all have areas where we're just have absorbed our environment without realizing that some of these things are not helpful. What would you, Chad, actually, for both of you, anyone listening who is in or on the brink of or wanted to be in a mixed race relationship, any number one pieces of advice, I guess, from each of you, if somebody's in that space?
I can go. So one, I don't think it necessarily even needs to be a interracial relationship, right? Like, I mean, sure, it's great to have romantic interracial relationships, but hopefully the lessons that we talk about in our book is for the coworker, is for the friend, is for, any type of relationship that makes you cross racial boundaries. But I think honestly, the number one thing is learning to let your defenses come down and listen well. Because the second I get defensive, I'm now superimposing what I think should be happening in this situation onto that human and not letting them be themselves, right? I'm making myself the standard and diminishing their own experience, right? So if I can let my defenses come down and just hear what the person has to say, now I'm actually going to start to get a picture of their lens. And that's hard to do, but it's so important, because if we don't do that, I kind of already said it, we're not going to be able to step into their shoes, and that person isn't going to feel safe with us. If I get defensive, then now I've turned a vulnerable moment into a bad situation. And so I think about it in marriage, right? If my wife comes to me and says, "Hey, that was hurtful," and then I say, "But you didn't see what I meant by that," right? Like, sure, maybe she didn't, but also if I say you didn't see what I meant by that, I am also saying I don't see what you mean by that, right? And so we just butted heads, and we didn't need to. So yeah, laying defenses come down.
That's good.
Yeah. One of the biggest things that I've learned, so that I will say is my biggest piece of advice is to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like, we humans hate discomfort. We avoid it by all means necessary. At least that's probably our human nature, is to do that. And even for me with my mind games that I was talking about, the Lord has had to teach me to even just let them be unanswered, even, and just sit in the discomfort and learn to not even let them affect me so much, like not think so much, which is uncomfortable for me. Like, I don't have to care what you think. I might for you to like me, but or approve of me or whatever. But even sitting in the discomfort of like, they might be looking at me for what reason, and I don't know why, and I can't fix that. Like, I can't. There's nothing I can do about it because they're way over there. I could go talk to them, but I'm not going to, obviously. So like, the discomfort even to sit in, they're still looking. Well, I'm just ready to live my life. Like, that for me is, I hate that. I did a saying for people watching the video, but they like makes sense. Perhaps if I say more often, that's something the Lord has been teaching me. Like, you will sit in discomfort, so you learn to lean on me. You learn that your comfort is not in understanding and being understood. And so I would encourage anyone wanting to be, like Chad said, in any kind of interactive relationship, whether it's your neighbor, your coworker, your friend, whatever. Let discomfort do the learning or the teaching that it needs to do. When someone maybe approaches you or even says, "This was my experience," and it's uncomfortable because it's painful for even you to hear that they went through that. To immediately try to like to fix it, in a sense, to say, well, maybe they just didn't, there's a time and place for that, but I think we skip even like breathing with each other and like, "That sucked. I'm so sorry. Wow. I would hate to be in your position," like, instead of skipping to, "They probably didn't mean it that way," or, trying to do the chin up, buttercup kind of thing. And it's even more so the case when we are talking about each other, like when we confront each other and say like, "Hey, that was not okay." Or even if we have the nerve and the boldness to say that was racist, usually what people hear is you're saying, "I'm a racist." Like, no, I'm talking about your action, not you as a human. But it's because we're so uncomfortable with calling something or hearing the words that my action to you was racist, or at least you perceived it as racism because of your understanding, your upbringing, your experiences. That discomfort is so awkward that we will avoid it and start saying like, "No," and start defending instead of sitting and listening and being like, what was it about it, or why is it? And then we can learn to be better for future, instead of attaching to our identity this lesson that we're trying to learn. Like, instead of saying mistakes are just something I knew sometimes, we start to think I'm a mistake. It's because we're so uncomfortable making mistakes. So we're like, well, I can't sit in that. I have to be perfect. So we just make it about like, we go completely the opposite direction instead of sitting in the uncomfortable middle, like I talked about a little bit ago. So I would just encourage people to let yourself be uncomfortable. I promise you, God's got you. There's no discomfort that God is not stronger than, that He can't lead you through, humble you through. Like, humility is so important in this. So if we are okay being uncomfortable, it won't last, I don't think, as long. Actually, I think our discomfort
super helpful.
lasts longer when we try to
I mean, race conversations can be very uncomfortable. I'm curious, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to frame my question. let me begin by saying I have learned over the years. I didn't just wake up realizing this, but it's taken me a long time that, I think white people, generally speaking, get defensive and uncomfortable with race conversations. And a lot of times we want to immediately jump in and say, no, that's not racism. No, that's not, or if we're called a racist, or, especially in the sense that you said, Adaeze, like, I'm not saying you are intrinsically just categorically racist, but that action, even if it was unintentional, that has racist undertones to it, or however you want to put it,
Exactly.
I think a legitimate question that white people, not just white people, but mostly white people have is like, the hard thing is sometimes that term racist can be difficult because is Hitler a racist? Yes. Were slave owners racist? Yes. And then you can get maybe a couple steps down, maybe, Donald Trump is sometimes called, he says racist things, whatever. And then it's like, and then and then the person that turned out the restaurant to linger a little bit too long, they're a racist. Like we have one term to describe all those. And I think sometimes people are like, wait a minute. I did something that's on par with the Holocaust, because it's the same term,
Yeah.
And maybe, soft racism, or maybe just, even about microaggression. Sometimes that term can be tricky, but I think that's sometimes when white people get defensive. I think that can be the frustration, is they feel like they're being put in this, even their unintentional action is being put in a category like the Holocaust, because it's like we have one term for all these things. Have you guys? I'm literally thinking out loud right now. Do you guys have any? Like, what do you think about that? How do we get that?
That's deep. That's a great question. I think it's hard, because I do think that's where, like you said, mostly us as white people go, and. So we also live in a hyper individualistic society too, right? So everything that is said now becomes internalized. And so it's hard to reconcile the nuances of understanding, hey, we live in a society that has preferences. We live in a society where things go a certain way more often than they go another way. And so the racist term, or the racist conversation, most of the time is actually pointing to a cultural idea, not an individual, right? And so I think that's the hard thing when we live in a really individualistic society, because if we say that's racist, my ear will hear, or my brain will hear, you are racist, because I'm trained to think everything that's being said to me is about me.
Oh,
right? But that's not the case, right? So when somebody says that's racist, or this has some, or what does this have to do with race? It's in the similar framework of hey, that's racist because that culturally puts me in a different place than you do, or than it puts you. So I think it's hard because it is so natural for us to think about it in an individualistic way. But this is one of those times that I think we just need to learn that this conversation is bigger than me.
That's
good. That's good.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Preston. Yeah. I've never even thought of it specifically like that. The way that you broke it down, there are so many different levels. I hate that, but kind of levels of racism.
Kind of, yeah.
Like we're in a game and you have to level.
Super Mario Brothers, level 3.
Yeah. No,
I don't know if that's a thing. I don't know if that's a thing.
But yeah, that's a really good point. I think that's important for even all of us to realize that's what happens in our brains, because even me saying, like, the word feels so like deep and heavy. And if I want to approach somebody about something, I actually try not to use it, but sometimes you can't really avoid it. But especially if you want them to get the point of what you're saying. But I totally acknowledge with you that it's such a buzzword for so many deep reasons. And so that's an important conversation, even within interracial relationships of any kind, whether it's, marriage or coworker or whatever, to kind of like learn each other's experience even with the word, I think would be helpful to realize like, hey, I'm not calling you a racist, just talking about the action or whatever it is. That is so that could be beautiful ground to break together, to understand, okay, when I say that word, you get really triggered because of XYZ, or whatever it is.
Right. That's good. All right. One last question. Let's turn the corner really quickly. Chad, what's your favorite beer?
Favorite beer?
Oh gosh.
Adaeze, I'm coming to you because I know you're not on the same plane as Chad is here, but yeah.
Well, so I've shifted a little bit more to whiskey of late, but
all right, we can go there too.
Yeah,
well, a little bit.
I don't know. I'm actually not extremely picky. I grew up in the Northwest, so I always leaned toward Northwestern breweries. Even in Colorado, I was craving something from Deschutes or Elysian or Kasi or something like that. Or Rogue. Oh, Rogue. If I had to say one that just like gets me going, it's the Rogue Hazelnut Brown. That's just my my go-to.
Okay. Rogue's, is that out of Portland? It's out of Oregon, right?
It's out of Oregon, yeah.
Somewhere. Yeah.
They've got breweries in Portland, but I believe it's out of a different city. It might be Eugene. I don't know. But yeah,
Rogue has a really good. I mean, their Dead Guy Ale is kind of what made them famous, right?
Yeah.
But their IPA is really good too. I mean, any IPA out of Oregon or Washington is going to be good.
Yeah.
Adaeze, you I know you've come a long way here. Have you had a taste of any?
Thank you. Thank you for recognizing that. I have. Like, I'd like to thank my husband for helping me get to this one.
I worked hard for this palate. I worked really hard for this palate.
Oh man, what was there was a prickly pear one we tried recently. Oh man, if I knew you were gonna ask this, I would have looked at the name. But I'm not as great with names because sometimes Chad will just try this with, so sometimes I'm like, oh, this one's delicious, and then the next one's better. But there was a prickly pear, was it an IPA?
No, I think it was just some sort of wheat ale. We moved to Arizona.
Yeah.
So
right, okay.
Yeah, so we had some, it was a local brewery that did a prickly pear wheat beer, and it was awesome.
It was
really
just great. Yeah. So that one was really good. As far as you said whiskey, so I'm gonna switch into whiskey for a second too. There's a Earl Grey.
This is actually a gin, but
that is a gin.
It is aged in a barrel.
They have whiskeys and gin. That's what I'm confusing. Well,
that is one of the best spirits I've ever had.
One of the best gins.
Family Jones Earl Grey barrel aged gin. It's gin aged in an Earl Grey barrel. Family Jones, free advertising.
Denver.
So I've never heard of this.
So it's not a huge distillery, but Family Jones in Denver teamed up with Celestial Seasonings, I believe, right? In Boulder, and Celestial Seasonings wanting to do an aged Earl Grey tea in one of their whiskey barrels. And
that's why I thought it was whiskey. I mean, whiskey barrel.
Apparently, the tea wasn't very good. I don't think Celestial Seasonings makes it anymore. But Family Jones took that barrel and aged their gin in it. So it's gin that has kind of like whiskey barrel undertones plus the Earl Grey floral flavor. It's amazing.
Yes. Sorry, that was not a whiskey. The whiskey name in my head, they're not the same name at all. But they do have a whiskey that's very good as well.
Yeah.
How about your favorites? What are your favorite beers?
You gotta do something.
I like a really hoppy yet also malty IPA. Something a little darker in color. Probably my favorite. What's the 10 Barrel Apocalypse is really, really good IPA. Yeah. What's the Bell's Two Hearted Ales, one of my go-to IPAs. Okay. My favorite brewery is probably Founders in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and New Holland in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Well, it's in Holland, Michigan, but also in Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids is just a mecca for beer.
I don't know it.
Founders has I'm blanking on the name now. It's like a strong ale, slightly hoppy, but just has a perfect flavor. It's their kind of flagship beer. I forget what it's called. And then Dragon's Milk is an imperial stout from New Holland that I really love. But that's a heavy. You gotta eat that with a spoon. I mean, it's a meal.
You do, yeah. Yeah. You need one of those fat milkshake straws to get that thing out.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on the show. Again, the book is, I'll hold it up here. White Boy, Black Girl. What's the subtitle? What Our Differences Can Teach Us, One Honest Conversation at a Time. And I do want to say up front that, at the end, I guess, when I first started this book, I was like, okay, this will be good for people in interracial relationships. But I was like, within a few pages, I was like, No, this is good for anybody that wants to understand interracial dynamics, period, and just relationships. I mean, it's such a helpful book. So I don't think there's anybody who shouldn't read this book, in my opinion. So White Boy, Black Girl, pick it up wherever books are sold. Thank you both for being on Theology Now. I really, really loved this conversation.
Thank you for having us.
This show is part of the Converge Podcast Network.